Welcome, everyone. Everyone is popping in from the waiting room, so I want to give everybody a chance to get their audio synced up. We are coming to you from Zoom today, which is a little bit different. Our Quick Bites before have been on Adobe Connect. So that does give us a lot more interaction options. I'm going to be practicing my growth mindset today by attempting a poll on Zoom, which will be something new for me. And I hope that the end of this, everyone else is inspired to try new things and make mistakes and get messy with their growth mindset. So we will go ahead and get started. So welcome to today's Quick Bite Growing Readers with a Growth Mindset. And I'm Melody Garcia. So a little bit about growing readers together before we dive into today's topic. In Colorado today, it's estimated that up to 57% of children are cared for informally, and that means that family members or neighbors or other unlicensed caregivers are taking care of the majority of kids in Colorado. And that's the same across the country for coming to us from outside Colorado as well. And so in Colorado, Growing Readers Together has been dedicated to reaching these family, friend, and neighbor caregivers, commonly referred to as FFN, and connecting them with the services they need through libraries. Growing Readers Together prioritizes these library services to family, friend, and neighbor caregivers because they often do not have access to other professional development resources, unlike licensed caregivers would. And quite likely, these informal caregivers are already in your library. The public library is perfectly situated to support early learning, particularly for those children who are not in a formal care situation. And it's our hope that by making early literacy intentional, transparent, and accessible in Colorado libraries, every child can have access to early learning opportunities, regardless of their care situation. And so we're going to dig into something called growth mindset and how there are simple changes in the way that we speak to children, in the way that we talk to adults about development, and in some of the choices that we make around our library that can really impact how a child develops their mindset. So a lot of the research that has been done on growth mindset has been done by Carol Dweck. And her book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, is always on the top of my reading list. And she really has dug into a lot of research and developed this idea that there are essentially two mindsets that we find ourselves falling into: a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And a growth mindset is the belief that our success depends on the time and effort that we put into something. And that means that a person's skills and their intelligence can be improved through hard work. A fixed mindset, on the other hand, believes that there is something inherent in us that makes us smart, that makes us talented, and that you either have it or you don't, and there's nothing that you can do to change that. So when we look at a growth mindset, we are looking at those times when we really embrace challenge, when we recognize that a challenge is how we learn, it's how we improve, and that the harder we work at something, the more we will learn, and the better we will become, the more skills we will gain. However, those with a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges because it will challenge their perception of being smart, of being talented. They tend to believe that hard work is for those people who aren't actually good at something. Overall, they just want to appear smart or skilled. And Carol Dweck has really dived into a lot of the extreme situations of these. There are numerous examples of child prodigies who have been shown to be just so amazingly talented at violin or some other skill And it came to them without ever having to work for it. And so they reach a plateau in their development where they won't improve any further than that. They'll never reach their full potential because they don't want to put in the work, and they don't want to take on challenges that could show them to be less talented than the world believes. We see this a lot in our daily lives as well. There are things that we have fixed mindsets on that we just aren't going to take on, either because we don't think that any amount of hard work will ever make us good at it at all, or because we're really afraid that someone's going to pull back the curtain and reveal us to be not as smart or talented as we would like to believe. So when we find ourselves in a growth mindset, we find ourselves embracing those challenges. You really look at challenges as opportunities. When you're asked to take on something totally new at work, like suddenly do your story times virtually, like, yes, I get to learn about this technology I never got to before. You also get to persist against those obstacles. When the challenge proves itself to be even more difficult, you're going to have what it takes to keep going. And that's really why growth mindset is so important to nurture in young children, because they are going to meet many, many obstacles. And the way they approach those obstacles really depends on the mindset that they have developed. A growth mindset also allows us to learn from criticism. We take that as constructive feedback because we know that rising against these setbacks, persisting against those obstacles is how we improve. And so we're going to look for those places. We're going to look at our weaknesses to see how we can improve them. But when we approach things with a fixed mindset, often that criticism gets either ignored or deflected. You either don't want to hear it, or you come up with excuses as to why that's not really your fault, because you can't accept any weakness because you don't think that that weakness can be overcome. Fixed mindset approaches tend to give up very easily when there are setbacks and obstacles in their way, because there isn't that belief that you can work through it. And now we can find ourselves with a growth mindset or a fixed mindset about different things. It's not an all or nothing approach to life. Often there are areas like intelligence where we might believe that, yes, the more you study, the more you learn, the more you will improve and the smarter you'll become. Whereas things like our athletic ability or our artistic ability, we might think is more fixed. That is my personal fixed mindset spot. And I'll tell you a little story, the story of two ukuleles. I worked at a library where we had a local ukulele group coming to the library, and me and a coworker both decided we really wanted to try and learn the ukulele. My coworker really embraced her mistakes. She took risks. She brought her ukulele with her everywhere. She practiced in the staff room. She attended every open ukulele jam that we had at the library. I, on the other hand, was incredibly nervous. I never thought of myself as being musically inclined, and I only practiced at home and not really that much. I never let anyone see me make mistakes on my ukulele. And guess which one of us actually learned how to play? She was not more talented than I. She did not have any more musical background than I did. It was simply through her hard work and her willingness to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes that gave her that ability to play. So what is your mindset? We're going to do a little poll. And like I said, I am still learning polls in Zoom. So hopefully this will work as planned. And we have a few statements that are either going to show you that are going to align with your mindset. So go ahead and read each statement and choose how that applies to you. So I believe every child in my story time can grow to be a successful reader. Is that not at all? maybe, usually, or you definitely believe that. And then looking at a more personal side, during performance reviews, I look forward to finding areas to improve. You, not at all, not me, maybe, depending on how it's delivered. Usually, or definitely, I believe that. So go ahead and select and submit your answers. And then you should go on to a new question. Oh, gotta scroll. That took me a second. Scroll down to see the next questions. There should be 2 more down there. With enough practice, I can believe I can learn to play a new musical instrument. And it's okay if I make mistakes during my story time or program or presentation, whichever applies to your work life. Let's see, Kristen, can we see, like, do we know how many people have been able to respond?
It looks like most everybody has responded. So I'm going to end and then I'm going to share. Can you guys see it now?
Yes, we can let us know if anyone can't see the results. But it looks like when it comes to the children in our story time, we have a very set growth mindset. We believe in those children and we believe in their ability to grow their brains and learn. A lot more mixed when it comes to our own personal growth. But still, no, I don't see anyone completely fixed on that. We're all willing to look at our weaknesses and grow for that. And more in that maybe are usually when it comes to music. I feel like a lot of those things, we've really been set up in our society to look at, you know, these musicians and artists and athletes as having a special talent that just can't be learned. And a lot of us willing to make mistakes and get messy. A lot of growth mindset out there that is fabulous. And so it looks like we have done a great job of developing this growth mindset in ourselves. So we're going to look at how to nurture that in the children and families in our library, because the research backs up this idea of growth mindset. If you look at the neural research going on, at the way that our brains have plasticity and grow, that really is the scientific basis of a growth mindset, because our brains are always changing and learning. And we talk about this a lot with our story time and early literacy programs, the importance of repetition in story time, because those little baby brains, the more they hear something, the more you do something, actually makes stronger pathways in your brain, making it easier to do that again and again. And even though our brains have more plasticity in the early years, even though it may be harder to change, we never stop being able to learn and reshape our brains. And this is why we can also not only learn more about and change our brains, we can change our mindset. Carol Dweck did a study with middle school students who were struggling in math. And so that red line, the red and blue line at the beginning of the graph is their decline. When they start middle school, quite often children are met with much more difficult math problems, and you start to see plummeting scores in math. And so there was a study done with an intervention group, and there were 2 groups. One was simply given study skills, and that is the red line on the graph. When those children were revisited, their decline in skills had continued. However, the blue line represents a group that was not only taught study skills, but explicitly taught about brain plasticity, about how we can mold and shape our brain, and how hard work and persistence increases intelligence. And that group saw an increase in their math skills. And just in case anyone is worried, that second control group that continued to decline was later also given that same information so that they had a chance to improve as well. But this shows that just the knowledge and the understanding of how our brain really works can foster a growth mindset. And even later in life, we can change our mindset from fixed to growth. Another interesting study showed just how impactful the way we speak to children is on how they develop growth mindset. Dweck has done this experiment with children from preschool through 5th grade. And what she sees again and again is that when children approach puzzles or similar challenges, they tend to rely on a growth or a fixed mindset, with some wanting to take on more and more challenging puzzles and some wanting to stick with those easy ones where they see success, representing that growth and fixed mindset. And she found that the comments and praise that the researchers used with the children actually shifted their mindset. When children were praised that they were smart, they wanted to pick easier puzzles the next time to reinforce that perception of their intelligence. But when the children were praised that they worked really hard, they more often opted to try an even more challenging puzzle with the belief that if they worked hard on that one, they would also be praised and they would also have success. So that simple shift in whether we're praising someone's innate ability, their smartness, versus their effort, how hard they worked on it, changed whether they came at the next problem with a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And so when we talk to children in our story times, in our library, in our programs, and in our lives, we need to be really thoughtful about the words that we're using and the praise that we're giving. It's also important to let children see us make mistakes, see adults fail, and how they handle that failure. I have encountered many children who have this belief that part of growing up, part of becoming an adult, is becoming perfect, that mistakes are something that only happens to children. And that is not true at all, and puts terrible pressure on us. But think of how many times you really practice ahead of a program or a story time, making sure you read it perfectly, make sure you know how to do that experiment just right, and make all of your mistakes behind a closed door. So really letting kids see your mistakes, or talking to them about how many times you had to try and how many times you had to fail, can really impact their perception of growth throughout life. I have some phrases on here that I really like to turn to when working with kids. Really saying this magic word "yet" comes up a lot. Don't give up. You just haven't figured it out yet. Or, oops, I messed that up. Let me try again. And really focusing on it's not perfect, but I'm really proud of how hard we worked. If anyone else has anything else, any back pocket phrases when you encounter failure and really want to start normalizing failure as a step towards success, please share them in the chat. We're going to go to some other scenarios as well, but as these come up, please share any phrases that you have found work really well with kids in normalizing failure, or in centering effort, really putting our effort in the center of our praise, praising that effort over talent, and really showing that it's through hard work that we find success. Instead of just saying, wow, that's beautiful. I can tell you've been practicing. Great job. That looks like it took a lot of hard work. I always try and have that one for the kid who does it really well and does it really fast and doesn't seem to have to work to do it well. Saying that was fast. Can you just imagine what you could do if you spent a little more time with it? Really not seeing anything as a final product. Everything is something that we continue to work at and work and improve. And really admitting when things are challenging and frustrating. This is hard. What we're doing is hard. But the more times we try, the more we're going to learn. Again, add to the chat any phrases that you have to praise that effort over challenge. And I can't see the chat, Christine. So if there's anything good popping up, please share.
Diana had a response to the previous slide in terms of what worked well for you. What would you change?
Yeah, really that reflective piece. That's excellent.
And so far, that is what has come through.
And then the last little topic that we can add to the way we talk to kids is really trying to celebrate our challenges. When we know that we're going to do something hard or something that's going to be hard for the kids, really getting excited about that challenge. Oh, this one's really going to stretch our brains. A challenge? This is going to be fun. Ooh, this is going to take some hard work. Who's with me? Or just talking about those challenges in general. When we're sparking up conversations with kids. Ooh, did anyone here try something new today? And finally, we want to make sure that one of the toughest things that our kids are going to do in these early years is learn how to read. And really approaching reading with a growth mindset is going to do wonders for the children in our communities. Because oftentimes, it's when they first enter elementary school that they start to develop a more strong, fixed mindset. When you look at a baby learning to walk, they don't care how many times they fall down. But in school, they start encountering different types of praise. They start comparing themselves to other kids more. And it's that stage that children start to fall into a more rigid, fixed mindset. And one of those biggest challenges that they are going to encounter school is learning to read. And the truth is, no matter how ready we make kids to read, no matter how many pre-learning skills they have, no matter how many story times they attend, for some children, solidifying that into reading is hard. It is a challenge. And so in our story time, we can read stories that directly model growth mindset and really explicitly talk about that growth mindset. I've got a few of those titles in the bottom there. If you know other books that really reinforce growth mindset or that trying again and working hard, please pop them in the chat. We're just wrapping up right now. And take time to really show the process of reading. We are all excellent readers, but if we can step back sometimes and instead of practicing that tricky word, make a mistake in story time. I do this with dinosaur names because dinosaur names are so hard for me. Showing them, oh, I've really got to work through this. I've really got to sound this up. Reading isn't always easy for me either. And praising that effort during skill building, when you're working on letter sounds, when you're working on rhyming, really making sure that you're talking about their effort and not just saying, wow, you're a great rhymer. Wow, you're going to be a great reader. Focus on that they've worked really hard to get there. And then when we see those beginning readers, frame reading as a challenge, as a positive challenge, but still as something hard that they are going to learn to do. That's why I really turn away from this term easy readers. When we label things as easy readers, that really sends a message to kids, especially those kids for whom it's not easy. And talking to them explicitly about brain plasticity, that they are going to grow their brain this year, that they are going to have to give their brain such a workout to master reading. And again, using that magic word yet. Okay, this might not be a book that you're reading yet. And so I know I've definitely seen some activity in the chat.
So there was an interesting comment put in that an article that had been read pointed out that sometimes parents distill growth mindset a little bit too far down to try harder and you'll be able to do it, which is an oversimplification. So parents also need to help the kid figure out, or the child figure out, how to understand what modifications and changes work for them. And then we had lots of book recommendations. Flight School by Lita Judge, Bunny Cakes by Rosemary Wells. Somebody else is learning to use the ukulele. The Magical Yet by Angela, and I'm gonna not be able to say her last name, Detrelisi, and Swimmy. So those were some excellent book recommendations.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for sharing. So we have another Quick Bite coming up next Tuesday at noon. We'll have a special guest from the Department of Education's preschool to third grade department. Laura Lay will be talking specifically about books to support those beginning or struggling readers in your library. And we try to maintain a growth mindset and always learn from our feedback. So if you have any feedback, please, Christine, do you have the link to put in chat for everyone to take our survey and give us some feedback?
I do not, because I
will grab it real quick. I'm going to stop sharing. We are at time, but I'm always able to hang out if anyone would like to stick around and ask any questions. I am here.